Daniel Mercer had never been afraid of silence, not until he came to Blackridge. Before that, silence had always meant peace, an empty apartment after a long day, a quiet highway at midnight, the few seconds after turning off the television before falling asleep. But Blackridge had a different kind of silence. It felt occupied, as if something was standing just beyond the edge of what Daniel could see, listening, waiting. And on his first night in his grandfather's house, Daniel learned that the silence always ended at exactly 2:17 in the morning, with 3 knocks on the front door. But Daniel didn't know that yet. 6 days earlier, Daniel had been standing beneath a gray sky, watching his grandfather's coffin disappear into the ground. Arthur Mercer had been 78 years old. He had lived alone for most of Daniel's life. Daniel remembered visiting him when he was young. At least, he thought he did. There were scattered memories, a wooden porch, the smell of burning leaves, a tall clock somewhere inside a house, and his grandfather's voice telling him something Daniel had never been able to remember. But after Daniel turned 8, the visits stopped. Arthur never explained why. Daniel's mother refused to talk about it, and eventually, Blackridge became nothing more than a name written on envelopes that arrived every Christmas. Then Arthur died. The funeral was small. Daniel stood beside his mother as the minister spoke. Only 7 people attended. Daniel recognized none of them, except one, Sheriff Thomas Vale. He stood several feet away from the others, tall, gray-haired, wearing a dark uniform beneath a long coat. Throughout the funeral, Daniel noticed the sheriff watching him, not occasionally, constantly. When the ceremony ended, Daniel's mother immediately walked toward the car. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived. Daniel assumed she was grieving. Then Sheriff Vale approached him. "Daniel Mercer." It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded. The sheriff looked at the freshly covered grave. "You look like him." "My grandfather?" The sheriff stared at Daniel for several seconds. "No." Daniel waited. The sheriff never explained. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed Daniel a small envelope. "Arthur asked me to give you this." Daniel turned it over. His name was written across the front. "When did he give you this?" 17 years ago." Daniel looked up. "What?" But the sheriff was already walking away. Daniel called after him. "Why would my grandfather leave me a letter 17 years ago?" Sheriff Vale stopped. For a moment, he remained completely still. Then he turned around. "Because Arthur knew you'd come back." Daniel felt something cold move through his stomach. "Come back from where?" The sheriff looked toward Daniel's mother. She was standing beside the car, watching them. "Ask her." Then he walked away. Daniel opened the envelope that night. Inside was a single piece of paper. The handwriting belonged to his grandfather. Daniel recognized it immediately. There were only 4 lines. "Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The house belongs to you now. Whatever happens, never open the front door after 2:17 a.m. Daniel read the letter 3 times. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, because he didn't know how else to react. His grandfather had always been strange, superstitious, secretive. Daniel remembered his mother saying that Arthur believed things other people didn't. She never explained what things. Daniel folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. The next morning, the lawyer confirmed that Arthur had left Daniel the house. Everything inside belonged to him. The furniture, the land, the belongings, and nearly 40 acres of forest surrounding the property. There There was only one condition. Daniel had to remain inside the house for 7 consecutive nights before he could sell it. Daniel almost refused. Then the lawyer told him how much the property was worth. More money than Daniel had ever seen. Enough to pay off his debts. Enough to leave his apartment. Enough to start over. 7 nights. That was all. Daniel agreed. His mother didn't. They argued in the parking lot outside the lawyer's office. You can't stay there. It's 7 nights. Then give up the house. Daniel stared at her. Do you realize how much money we're talking about? I don't care. You don't care that Grandpa left me enough money to change my life? His mother's expression changed. Arthur didn't leave you that house to help you. Daniel frowned. Then why did he leave it to me? She looked away. Mom. She opened the car door. Why did Grandpa stop letting me visit Blackridge? She froze. Daniel stepped closer. What happened here? His mother slowly turned toward him. For the first time, Daniel noticed something in her expression. Fear. Not grief, not sadness. Fear. You were never supposed to come back. Those were the last words she said before driving away. Daniel watched the car disappear down the road. He told himself she was emotional. People said strange things after funerals. At least, that's what he wanted to believe. The house stood 3 miles outside Blackridge. The road leading to it passed through dense forest. There were no neighboring homes, no streetlights, no businesses, only trees. Daniel arrived shortly before sunset. The house looked almost exactly like he remembered. 2 stories, dark wooden siding, a stone chimney, a wide front porch, and above the roof, hundreds of pine trees swayed gently in the wind. Daniel parked beside the house. He removed his suitcase from the trunk. Then he noticed someone standing between the trees. A man. Daniel stopped. The figure stood perhaps 50 yards away, motionless, watching him. Hello? No response. Daniel stepped closer. The man turned, then disappeared into the forest. Daniel considered following him. Instead, he went inside. The smell hit him immediately. Dust, old wood, and something else, something sweet, like flowers left too long in water. Daniel turned on the lights. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. He checked the breaker. The electricity was working. The lamp simply refused to turn on. Then, from somewhere upstairs, Daniel heard footsteps. 1 step, then another. Slow. Heavy. Daniel froze. Hello? The footsteps stopped. Daniel grabbed the fireplace poker beside the wall. He climbed the stairs. Every step creaked beneath his feet. At the top was a narrow hallway. 4 doors. 3 were open. 1 was closed. Daniel checked the first bedroom. Empty. The second. Empty. The third belonged to his grandfather. The bed was perfectly made. A glass of water sat on the nightstand. Daniel touched it. Still warm. He pulled his hand away. His grandfather had been dead for 6 days. Daniel searched the room. Nothing. Then he noticed the photograph beside the bed. It showed Daniel as a child. He was standing on the porch of the house. His grandfather stood beside him. Someone else was standing behind them. A woman. Daniel didn't recognize her. Her face had been scratched out. Daniel turned the photograph over. 3 words were written on the back. He remembers you. Daniel stared at the words. A sound came from the hallway. The closed door opened, slowly. Daniel stepped into the hall. The room beyond the door was dark. He approached. Inside was a staircase, leading down. Daniel frowned. A staircase from the second floor should have led toward the first floor, but this one didn't. It descended farther than the height of the entire house. Daniel turned on his phone flashlight. The stairs disappeared into darkness. He took one step down, then another. A voice whispered from below. "Daniel." He ran. Daniel slammed the door. He pushed a dresser in front of it, then stood in the hallway, breathing heavily. Someone knocked on the front door, 3 times. Daniel checked his phone. 8:43 p.m. He slowly went downstairs. Through the window, he saw an elderly woman standing on the porch. She wore a red coat. Daniel opened the door. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled. "You must be Arthur's grandson." "Daniel." "I know." Her name was Evelyn Shaw. She owned the diner in Blackridge. She handed Daniel a covered plate of food. "Arthur used to eat at my diner every Thursday." "Thank you." Evelyn looked past Daniel into the house. Her smile disappeared. "Have you been upstairs?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes." "Did you open the narrow door?" Daniel stared at her. "How do you know about that?" Evelyn stepped backward. "You should leave it closed." "What's down there?" She looked toward the forest. "Depends on who opens it." Daniel almost laughed. "What does that mean?" Evelyn looked back at him. "Arthur spent 30 years making sure that door stayed shut." "Why?" "Because some doors don't keep people out." She paused. "They keep things in." Then Evelyn left. Daniel watched her car disappear. He locked the door. At 11:30, Daniel tried calling his mother. No answer. He called again. Nothing. He left a message. "Mom, I need you to tell me what happened here when I was a kid." He hesitated. "And why Grandpa thought I'd come back." Daniel slept downstairs. He didn't want to be near the narrow door. At 2:16 a.m., he woke up. The house was completely silent. Daniel checked his phone. 2:16. Then the grandfather clock in the hallway began ticking. Daniel hadn't noticed it before. Tick, tick, tick. The minute changed. 2:17. 3 knocks came from the front door. Daniel sat up. Knock, knock, knock. He remembered the letter. Never open the front door after 2:17 a.m. Daniel remained still. Another 3 knocks. Then a voice. "Daniel?" He stopped breathing. It was his grandfather. "Daniel, open the door." Daniel stood, slowly. He approached the window beside the entrance. The curtains were closed. "Grandpa?" Silence. Then the voice answered. "You came back." Daniel's hand moved toward the curtain. He stopped. His grandfather was dead. Daniel stepped away. The knocking stopped. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Daniel heard footsteps on the porch, moving around the house, past the living room, past the kitchen, stopping outside the back door. 3 knocks. Daniel backed away. The footsteps continued, around the house, stopping beneath the bedroom window. Then Daniel heard something scratching against the wall, climbing. Daniel looked toward the ceiling. The sound moved upward, onto the roof, then stopped. Daniel didn't sleep again. At sunrise, he opened the front door. No one was there, but on the porch were wet footprints, bare feet. The footprints began at the edge of the forest. They crossed the yard, climbed the porch, stopped at the front door, then continued around the house. Daniel followed them. They ended beneath the upstairs window. There were no footprints leading away. Daniel drove into town. Blackridge was smaller than he expected. One grocery store, a gas station, a church, a diner, a sheriff's office, and dozens of old houses. Daniel entered Evelyn's diner. She saw him immediately. "You heard the knocking." Daniel sat at the counter. "Who was outside my house?" Evelyn poured coffee. "I don't know. It sounded like my grandfather." Evelyn stopped pouring. Daniel noticed several customers looking toward them, then quickly looking away. "Evelyn." She placed the coffee pot down. "You should speak with Sheriff Vale." "Why?" "Because he's the only person still alive who knows what Arthur was doing." Daniel drove to the sheriff's office. Vale was sitting behind his desk. He didn't look surprised to see Daniel. "You opened the door." "No." The sheriff looked up. "Good. What happens if I do?" Vale leaned back. "You ever wonder why Blackridge is so small?" Daniel frowned. "People leave." "No." The sheriff stood. "People try." Daniel stared at him. "What does that mean?" Vale walked toward a filing cabinet. He removed a folder. Inside were dozens of missing person reports. Since 1987, 63 people have disappeared from Blackridge. Daniel looked through the photographs. Men, women, young, old. "Why haven't I heard about this?" "Because officially most of them moved away." "But they didn't?" Vale closed the folder. "No." "Where did they go?" The sheriff stared at him. "Your grandfather believed they were still here." Daniel thought about the staircase. "Inside the house?" Vale didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question. "Did Arthur ever tell you about the night you disappeared?" Daniel froze. "What?" "You were 7 years old." Daniel shook his head. "I never disappeared." "You were missing for 3 days." "That's impossible." "Your mother, your grandfather, half the sheriff's department searched for you." Daniel stared at him. "Where did they find me?" Vale's expression changed. "We didn't." Daniel waited. "Then how did I come back?" "One morning you walked out of the forest." "By myself?" Vale nodded. "You weren't hurt." Daniel's mouth went dry. "What did I say?" "Nothing." "For 3 days?" "For 11 months." Daniel felt the room tilt. "I stopped talking?" "You stopped talking about Blackridge." Vale stepped closer. "Then one day you told Arthur something." "What?" The sheriff looked toward the window. "You said there were people beneath his house." Daniel left the sheriff's office. He called his mother. Again and again. No answer. He drove toward the house. Halfway there, he noticed something beside the road. A red coat. Evelyn. She was standing among the trees. Daniel stopped the car. "Evelyn?" She walked deeper into the forest. Daniel followed. "Wait!" She disappeared behind the trees. Daniel continued. Then he found a clearing. Dozens of wooden posts stood in the ground. Each one had a photograph attached. Daniel approached the nearest. A man, missing since 1993. Another, a woman, missing since 2001. Daniel recognized the photographs from Sheriff Vale's folder. All 63 missing people. Then he noticed the newest post. Empty, except for a name. Daniel Mercer. Daniel stepped backward. A branch snapped behind him. He turned. No one. When he looked back, the photographs were gone. The posts were empty. Daniel ran. He returned to the house before sunset. The narrow door upstairs was open. The dresser had been moved. Daniel hadn't moved it. He entered his grandfather's bedroom. The photograph beside the bed had changed. The woman with the scratched-out face was gone. Now the photograph showed only Daniel and his grandfather. Daniel turned it over. The message was different. It knows you're here. Daniel dropped the photograph. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. At 2:10 a.m., he sat in the living room. The fireplace poker rested across his knees. His phone was recording. 2:15. The grandfather clock ticked. 2:16. Daniel heard footsteps outside, coming from the forest, slow, dragging. They reached the porch. 2:17. 3 knocks. Daniel remained seated. Daniel, his grandfather's voice. Open the door. Daniel said nothing. Daniel. Then another voice spoke, his mother's voice. Please. Daniel stood. Mom? Daniel, open the door. He approached. Mom? She began crying. Please, something is chasing me. Daniel reached for the lock, then remembered something. His mother hadn't answered his calls. Daniel looked through the peephole. His mother stood outside, barefoot, covered in blood. Behind her stood his grandfather, and behind his grandfather were dozens of people, the missing people from the photographs, all staring at the door. Daniel stumbled backward. His mother's crying stopped. She smiled. Open the door. Daniel ran upstairs. He pushed the dresser against the narrow door. Then he heard knocking, not from downstairs, from behind the narrow door. 3 knocks. Daniel stared at it. Something whispered from the other side. You already opened it once. The dresser moved. Daniel backed away. The door opened. Beyond it, the staircase descended into darkness. Daniel should have run. Instead, he remembered Sheriff Vale's words. You said there were people beneath his house. Daniel turned on his flashlight and started walking down. The stairs continued for several minutes, far deeper than the foundation. The air grew colder. The walls changed from wood to stone. Daniel reached the bottom. A tunnel stretched ahead. Along the walls were photographs, hundreds of them. Daniel recognized some of the people, missing residents, his grandfather, his mother, Sheriff Vale, Evelyn, and himself. Daniel moved deeper. He found a room. Inside was a desk. His grandfather's journals covered the surface. Daniel opened the newest one. The final entry had been written the night before Arthur died. Daniel returned, just like before. He doesn't remember what happened when he was 7. That's good. If he remembers, it will remember him completely. I have kept the door closed for 17 years, but I'm getting old. It knows I'm dying, and when I'm gone, it will call him home. Daniel turned the page. There was one final sentence. Whatever happens, Daniel must never see the room at the end of the tunnel. Daniel slowly looked up. Ahead of him was another doorway. He walked toward it. Every instinct told him to stop, but he continued. Inside was a large underground chamber. The walls were covered with photographs, thousands. Some were decades old. Others looked recent. Daniel moved through them, then stopped. There was an entire section dedicated to him. Daniel as a child. Daniel at school. Daniel graduating. Daniel moving into his apartment. Daniel attending his grandfather's funeral. Daniel arriving at the house. Every moment of his life had been photographed, even moments when he had been completely alone. Then Daniel found the newest photograph. He removed it from the wall. The date was written underneath. Tomorrow's date. The photograph showed Daniel standing in the forest. He was covered in dirt. Blood ran from his nose. Behind him stood his grandfather, and beside his grandfather stood another man. Daniel moved the flashlight closer. The man looked exactly like him. Same face, same hair, same clothes. Daniel stared at the photograph. Then he noticed something written on the back. He turned it over. 3 words. You came back. A noise came from behind him. Daniel slowly turned. At the far end of the chamber stood a man. Same height, same clothes, same face. Daniel's face. The man smiled, then spoke. You're early. Daniel couldn't move. The other Daniel stepped closer. You aren't supposed to find me until tomorrow. Daniel backed toward the tunnel. Who are you? The other Daniel stopped smiling. You really don't remember. Remember what? The lights throughout the chamber turned on. Daniel looked around. Hundreds of photographs covered the walls. Then he saw something he hadn't noticed before. Dates. Every photograph of Daniel had 2 dates. One was the date the photograph was taken. The other was the date Daniel died. And according to the photograph in his hand, Daniel Mercer had died 17 years ago. Behind him, the other Daniel whispered, Now it knows you remember. From somewhere deep beneath the chamber came a sound. Not a growl, not a scream, a heartbeat. One enormous heartbeat. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then another heartbeat. Closer. The other Daniel looked toward the darkness. For the first time, he appeared afraid. Run. Daniel stared at him. What? The man stepped backward. It knows which one of us is real. The lights went out, and in the darkness, hundreds of voices whispered Daniel's name at the same time. Daniel ran, but halfway through the tunnel, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Sheriff Vale. Daniel answered. Where are you? The sheriff sounded terrified. Under the house. There was silence. Then Vale whispered, Daniel, listen to me carefully. Something moved through the tunnel behind Daniel. Fast, getting closer. Vale continued. Whatever you saw down there. Daniel looked back. 2 human figures stood in the darkness. Both had his face. Neither of them is you. The call disconnected, and from somewhere directly behind Daniel, his grandfather's voice whispered, Don't let them leave Blackridge. End of part 1.